Health and Fitness with David Hollywoods.
With DS Sports. Is your sports club ready for a Christmas kit upgrade? Contact DS Sports. dssports.ie.
Hello and welcome. We're focusing on young people for this week's episode. You'll hear from Offaly Youth leader Charlie Bodilo on the Youth Council of Ireland's campaign to lower the voting age and improve youth services. Jen Hogan of the Irish Times believes 5th and 6th year students shouldn't have to ask to use the toilet. She runs us through a myriad of ways we're keeping young adults from growing up. And over 200 young people are heading to Westmeath this weekend for the No Name Club National Youth Conference. We meet their vice president. And to mark World COPD Day next week, you'll meet a remarkable woman in Portlaoise whose personal story really inspired me. Very shortly we will have a new government, and in that spirit the Youth Council of Ireland is calling for the government to invest in its young people and specifically in youth work services. A recent Red C poll has underlined that 66% of people say there are not enough facilities for young people in their area. I'm very glad to say that joining us on Health and Fitness this evening is Charlie Bodilo, who is a 19-year-old from Offaly. He says that youth services actually saved his life when he was 17 and feeling isolated in a rural part of the county. Charlie joins us on the programme. As I said, Charlie, thanks very much for taking our call.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Great. And we appreciate you taking the time. Tell me about this idea that youth services intervened in your life in such a positive way. What was that and how did it happen?
So I'd say for me, growing up in very rural Offaly, as you mentioned, I felt very isolated and very taken away from the rest of the community. I grew up very far away from any possible public transport, so that was a great barrier for me for making friends. And on top of that, I didn't share many of the same pastimes that many of my classmates had. I didn't really have an interest in sports or music, so I didn't really find my community of people until I was 17, when by pure accident I was included in Offaly Corlin and Og. Now, the Corlin and Og system is something that is run in the entire Republic of Ireland. And these are basically youth councils. So each county council and city council for the larger counties has its own corresponding youth council, where a group of young people will come together, possibly on a monthly or bi-weekly basis, online or in person, to discuss areas in the county that they think should be improved and choose a topic that's incredibly important to them. For my youth council, we focused on disability, bringing out a 3-pronged disability campaign where we worked with the libraries, we worked with Offaly Disability and Equality Network, and we worked to create a podcast highlighting disabilities in Offaly and highlighting what we thought was important that people of Offaly knew. And through that, I found my community of people. Before I joined youth work, like I mentioned, I was suffering from incredibly poor mental health, and I had a very severe eating disorder due to my being very unhappy with where I was in life. And on top of that, I didn't really have a drive for life. I didn't know where my future was, and I felt rather hopeless because as a young person, I felt like I didn't really have a place in this world. I had opinions, but I had no platform to share them on. And I didn't think that a young person could make a big difference unless you were really, really well known, like Greta Thunberg. But through youth work, my opinion completely changed, because thanks to Offaly Corlin and Og, I went on to represent Offaly in the National Youth Assembly of Ireland, talking at assemblies on climate and AI. And now currently I'm a guest delegate for the National Youth Assembly of Ireland on gender equality. And all of these amazing opportunities led me to create my own community, what I had been very much lacking in Offaly, and find friends that shared the same passions as me and discover my passion in life. I went from somebody who would spend my evenings alone, basically watching TV and feeling very listless, to going out as often as I could and meeting up with people, creating connections, and growing my soft skills and hard skills through youth work. So you can tell youth work has a very big place in my heart.
It's It's just given me a massive smile on my face to listen to that pathway and that journey that you've been on. And it struck me that there's a couple of things that have come up in how you're explaining your story that seem like really important aspects. And the first we're going to circle back to in a bit, which is agency, like having control not over your own personal destiny, but feeling like that you can have an impact on society for the better, and we'll touch on that shortly. But the one that's coming up again and again and again when you're speaking is community, and having a group of people around you that can support you, that you can socialise with, and as you said, that you can express yourself around and feel comfortable. For people growing up from the ages of, say, 15 through to 20, is there anything more important in life?
No, I can say that with 100%, that I think finding your community is of extreme importance for all young people, whether it's when you're young in your teenage years and you're trying to figure out what my future is, where I want to go in life, or whether you're in your 20s and you're in a new place for college and you're trying to figure out the connections, you're trying to organize your life a bit better. I think the community really brings people together and really creates all of these new connections that you didn't think were possible. And it also opens your eyes a lot more to the opportunities that the world brings. I'm currently studying a degree that would not have happened had I not joined youth work. I didn't know that there was a place in life. I'm studying human nutrition and dietetics at Trinity and TU Dublin. And I didn't know that becoming a dietitian and studying food in this way was an option to me. But here I am 2 years later and I'm studying it and I'm loving it and I'm thriving here. And I think that's a really big aspect, is that this community helps open your eyes up to the new opportunities that the world can bring and to new pathways that you can take as a young person.
As we speak today, Charlie, there's probably plenty of people like you in Offaly and Laois and Westmeath across the Midlands who are living rurally, who do feel isolated. So from your perspective, from the Youth Council's perspective, we're talking about calling for increased funding for facilities, and something that I've heard you mention once or twice in our chat is cutting out the isolation, and by that I mean improving transport so that something simple as going from a townland to the town centre can be done with a lot more ease.
Yeah, accessible public transport is always something that is brought up in youth work. It causes a lot of barriers to accessing youth work, especially in rural areas where there isn't enough funding for there to be youth work centres in every town. And if somebody were to avail of a youth work area, whether that's looking for help, for example, from Jigsaw, where I know that in my town, Jigsaw was in like the main town, but if you were from one of the outskirts, smaller towns, you had to travel to access possibly life-saving counselling. Or in the areas of, I know for my Corla, for Offaly Corla, we met again in the main town, and some young people had to travel for 3 or 4 hours to make it to these youth work events, which more accessible public transport would have helped more young people access these youth events and have the same opportunities that I have had. Because as much as young people all support each other, we do need sometimes a guiding hand to get us there. But a lack of funding and a lack of resources, and honestly a lack of pay parity, leads to lowered youth work leaders, and so youth work systems closing down. So I think those are two really big areas and the National Youth Council of Ireland is highlighting this.
Do you think that the state has neglected young people in this country?
I think that young people have definitely been a bit neglected. I will admit that I think that youth work funding and the increase in youth work has changed a lot and has improved a lot in the last even 5 years. I know that I have 2 older siblings and they would not have had the same access to youth work that I had even. However, young people are an investment and we're not a cost. We deserve to have more funding put into us. We deserve to have more trust put into us as well. And we deserve to have a voice at every table that concerns us. And I think that that's really important, is that the youth voice has to be represented, because there's nothing about us without us.
And let's drill down to that for a second, because one of the things that the National Youth Council of Ireland is calling for is extending the voting age to 16-year-olds. And that's exactly what we're talking about here in terms of young people having a say and ultimately being able to hold the government and the state to account. Because, Charlie, obviously this is your first general election coming up that you can have a vote in. I imagine that probably means a great deal to you.
It does. Leading up to it, I know that myself and many of my friends, we were talking to everybody. We said, check the register, make sure you're registered if you need to apply for a postal vote. And I know for myself, I'm already planning on traveling back to Offaly, as I'm currently residing in Dublin for a time, to vote on that day, because it is so important that our voices are being heard. But I know so many other young people who are so passionate about youth work, who are so passionate about youth politics, and who could say probably way more than even I could say about politics right now, but who are unable to vote because they're 16, because they're 17. And I think that that is honestly a little bit ridiculous, because young people deserve to have that seat at the table if you're making services that we are being a part of.
Charlie, in this country, we have a Minister for Children, and then obviously in service of adults in this country, there's a whole range of cabinet positions, but the National Youth Council of Ireland is calling for a Minister for Youth. What do you think about that?
I think it's really important that we have a Minister for Youth, with young people making up such a large proportion of the population, and young people approaching voting age and being heavily involved as voters, as members of youth work communities. I think that a Minister for Youth is integral to the future of youth work and youth integration into Ireland and into Ireland society, because more and more we see young people getting involved in different areas, whether it's the Council of Europe or whether it's involved in COP29 right now. Young people are fighting for change. They're fighting to be heard. And I think it's important that there is someone there to fight for them to be listened to. And with Ireland already having such great access for young people to get involved, to have their voices heard, I think that increasing that will just be a benefit for everybody. Because young people, I find, can think outside the box a lot better than some other people and have a real agency to themselves.
Well, the opportunity to express your opinion and for young people to have their voice heard does come on November 29th. It'll be Friday, November 29th, and that is the place to participate if indeed people listening want to move the dial and move it towards young people's issues. Charlie Boudeleau, you've been great with your time. It's been really enjoyable listening to you and your story. Thanks for joining us on Health and Fitness. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful experience. Should 5th and 6th year students call their teachers Sir and Miss? We discuss next.
Health and Fitness
with DS Sports. Is your sports club ready for a Christmas kit upgrade? Contact DS Sports at 085 871 5311 or info@dsports.ie. DS Sports, the teamwear specialists. Your success, our priority. Let's grow together. Midlands 103.
Now, if you've had kids and they were going to school, you may have done the research, and the research has told us in recent years, certainly, that let's call it the Nordic model of education has benefited them pretty well. And one of the things that it promotes is going to school at a later age, which obviously means finishing up school at a later age. The question is, are our students, are our children in this country more mature when they leave, or are we missing a trick when it comes to their education through those later years in secondary school? Jen Hogan's been writing all about this in the Irish Times this week, and she joins us on Health and Fitness this evening. Jen, thanks very much for taking our call.
Pleasure to be here.
Tell us, it is an interesting one. Students are graduating at the ages of 18 and 19 from secondary school now, but by the same token, whilst they're allowed to vote and drink, they are kept within those very adolescent rule structures of school, be it notes for absences, calling teachers Miss and Sir. Is the idea here, maybe would you suggest that we push them into a more college-like set of rules through 5th and 6th year, for instance?
Absolutely. I think children starting school at a later age is a great thing. I think we're sometimes in a rush to have childhood over, get them in early. We deluded ourselves a little bit with this belief, oh, they're clever, they're sociable, they're bright, they need it, as if Montessori or preschool education or just general play couldn't cater for your average 4 or 5 year old. And obviously it can. And we have seen, as you pointed out, this transition towards starting school later. What we haven't seen is a change in how we treat our senior students, even though a lot of the time, even in fifth year, they'll become adults. Maybe if you've got a summer baby, you'll find lots of summer babies might turn 18 towards the end of fifth year, meaning in sixth year, it's most of the students will be 18, some even 19. And transition year, which is another part, I suppose, of school that we've seen change. Over 70% of students now do transition year and rising. So it's become very much the norm. The majority of students are going to take that up. So if they're already starting later, and they have this extra year of school, transition year, which years and years ago in the olden days was sometimes considered an option, perhaps if you weren't going to continue with your education, but now it's just very much part of the school structure. It means, as you pointed out, we have adults in the senior part of the year, but we haven't changed how we treat them. Now, obviously, we have no right as parents to this information about our children, things like how they're getting on, how they're performing academically. And yet I went out to parents in preparation for writing this piece and ask them even things like parent-teacher meetings. Do you still have a parent-teacher meeting in sixth year? Does your student attend with you? Your student child, your adult child attend with you? A lot of the time they don't. This conversation is happening between schools and parents and a grown adult, though we might not get our heads around it because they're still in school, they're still in the uniform, and they're still very much conforming to what's expected from them in school. But we're having a conversation about another adult, and we're all quite happy with this because we want to know. As you know, we've kind of got into the habit of going, sure, they haven't a clue. You know what 18-year-olds are like, they haven't a clue. In my day, it was different. And possibly it was different because we gave adult responsibilities maybe a little bit sooner, because if you were in college at 17, it wasn't that unusual. Maybe you might turn 18 during your first year in college, but perhaps start at 17. That wasn't that unusual. Now we have continued to, I believe, infantilize our children by continuing with practices in senior cycle that really aren't in keeping with their age. The fact that they can go to the pub, the fact that many of them will be able to vote in this general election, and yet they still have to ask permission to go to the toilet. They still have to call another adult sir or miss. They still have to explain their absences or get a parent to send in a note about a doctor's appointment, not an adult. Like when you start to think about it, that another adult is explaining an adult's absence. This is all very general. And there is an option. A student could turn around and say, this isn't to happen. But most students aren't aware of that. And most parents would be quite happy for things to continue with the status quo. And I actually spoke to a couple of teachers, and some said it kind of suits us, that the students aren't aware of this. At best, what we're seeing are parent-teacher meetings where the student attends with them. But there's still a whole conversation happening there that the student doesn't really have a chance to say, well, I'd prefer to do things my way, because it's the mindset, I suppose, of continuing to keep them within a similar situation with similar boundaries to the earlier years in secondary school.
You've raised so many fascinating points there, Jen. One that strikes me is just imagining a scenario where this 18 or 19-year-old, as you say, is the subject of a parent-teacher meeting but not present during it. But by the same token, that very evening or that weekend could be working and serving the public on their own merits, working, earning their own living, as it were. And can you imagine having a performance review for your part-time work at the weekend with the parent of the worker rather than the idea of this generation? Let's say they would have grown up through the pandemic as well. So I suppose that's also undermining their development if we're talking about infantilizing them. This particular catchment that will have grown up through the pandemic when they were younger, they probably need a bit more hoosh out the door or a bit more exposure to maturity.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing that happened to a lot of our children and teenagers over the pandemic is when we took away so many of their opportunities to develop. We took away school, we closed off their activities, their potential for friendships and interactions with peers. And chronologically, they got older, but developmentally, they stayed maybe not exactly where they were, but they didn't keep up anyway. And you will hear from teachers and you will hear from schools that they still see signs of this. So we do have a duty and a responsibility to try and support our young adults, because it's funny. Another thing I've learned over the years of talking to parents and teachers and even people in third level institutions, we are seeing a situation where you've got parents getting in touch with third level institutions to try and smooth the way for their child or daughter, or because perhaps they've come against an obstacle and they don't know how to deal with it, and the adult is getting involved again. And we're all staying in this mindset. We're not helping our young adults to develop and to move on. I mean, if you go back, and I spoke to parents beforehand and said, do you think your older teen is as capable as you were at that stage? And they'll often talk about the responsibilities that they had, even things like making dinner for the whole family, or I was going out and I had a part-time job, and I was responsible for doing my own laundry, responsible for getting myself to school, responsible for filling out my own CAO form. All these things are heavily supported by parents and by the school now. And it's wonderful to have support, but we have to recognize when we're overstepping the mark and when we're actually holding our kids back and I say, even use the word kids. I have one of those who is 18 and 60 at the moment, and I use this word kid, where he's an adult, he's a grown adult. We have to actually help them. Our job is to prepare them to be independent of us. As it stands, parents, by accepting the status quo, and schools by continuing with these practices, we're not doing that. We're actually doing the exact opposite and keeping them dependent on us for longer. So it's about, I suppose, that shift between support and taking over and continuing to treat them as if they were younger children. I wouldn't like to see us reverting back to children starting school at a younger age. That was something I was kind of conscious to make the point of. I do think there is great advantages in them starting a bit later, but we have to be mindful that we don't stifle them at the same time, that we help to pick up on those pandemic years that we're missing, that we help support them through it, and we give them the confidence to know, you can do this, you can go out there. Because the other big side of it is, I remember when any of my kids turned 18, not they were causing trouble, but you were saying, I was reminded, you're an adult now. There are adult consequences for your actions. So always be mindful of things. It's different when you're an adult. And we say this to children now, or to adults, young adults, as they turn 18 and 19. We tell them, you're an adult, there are adult consequences. Step up to the plate, be mature. It's time you copped on. And then we totally undermine them by treating them like a child. And also that shift that should be happening in the relationship between students and teachers now is they're both adults. They play a different role within school, but they're both adults. And we should be teaching young adults how to adult. That's what we should be doing.
You touched on something I wanted to pick up on, Jen, before we finish our conversation, and that is the question of trust. And if you think back to when you were an adolescent graduating into being an adult, and I do the same, I remember these moments where my parents turned to me and said, genuinely, I trust you to do this. It's your responsibility now. And it entirely changes your relationship with the task or the responsibility. It forces you to develop that maturity, as it were. And if there's any parents listening this evening, I suppose something that they might do as an experiment, if they do have an adult child living with them, is to divest some of that responsibility from themselves and to actually invest a bit of trust and see how far it gets them.
Absolutely, because we don't have to let go completely. I mean, we should be able to, because, again, reminding ourselves they are adults. But if we want to make sure that they don't slip through the cracks, because that's always a fear. What if they mess up and they miss out on an opportunity because I wasn't overseeing things, or they just perhaps don't have the drive or the motivation, or again, that developmental delay that's there because of the pandemic years, and even those missed opportunities for socialization, which often bring teenagers on. It's that little bit of trust that you could divest. I suppose you have to be wary of the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you keep telling somebody you can't be trusted, you can't manage this, you definitely won't be okay, I'm always here to fix it, it doesn't give them a chance. But it's funny, as you said that, there is something very empowering about being told, I trust you now. You realize you're taking ownership of it. This is up to you. And naturally, most of us, even if they are driving us mad, and at 18 your parents drive you mad a lot, but even if they're driving us mad, most of us don't want to let them down. So we will try and run with that trust and do our best with it. But also it's that, I suppose, it's your parents showing you, or your guardian showing you, I have confidence in you to do this. Yeah,
and maybe the teachers can lay off on the required permission for bathroom breaks and such.
Absolutely, that would be a win too, most definitely. I mean, I just have to say something there, because one of the arguments that came back at me was, we can't have everybody walking out of class, just using the bathroom as they feel like it. That lecture theatres do not empty with students using the bathroom just
It's
because
not
they
what
can
happens.
in college. It won't happen in school either.
Jen Hogan of the Irish Times, thanks very much for joining us to chat about that. Great work as always.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on, David.
Tús Athlone is hosting hundreds of young people and youth leaders this weekend. If you've not heard about the No Name Club, stay tuned.
Health and fitness.
With DS Sports. Is your sports club ready for a Christmas kit upgrade? Contact DS Sports at 085 871 5311 or info at dssports.ie. DS Sports, the teamwear specialists. Your success, our priority. Let's grow together.
Midlands 103.
You're very welcome back to the programme. All through the course of this episode of Health and Fitness, we've been talking about young people, and before the break you will have heard our conversation about what the National Youth Council of Ireland are calling for in terms of youth services, and very much in that spirit we're continuing our conversation around young people and how we might be able to help them navigate their way through that crucial phase of their life. And in that spirit, as I said, we're introducing the idea of the No Name Club. The No Name Club is a voluntary national youth organisation aiming to empower young people aged 15 to 18. They provide fun, safe environments where people can socialise without the pressures of specifically and particularly alcohol or drugs. They are coming to the Midlands. Their National Youth Conference is taking place in Tús Athlone this weekend. The Vice President of No Name Club is Edith Geraghty. She joins us on the programme this evening. Edith, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Not at all. We are really delighted to be coming back to the Midlands. It is our favourite place to come for our National Youth Conference, and we love coming here every year, and all of our young people have such a wonderful time engaging with the college and the outdoor education people there. They do a marvellous job of hosting us. We're very lucky to have them as a venue and a partner in this.
And the geography is probably helpful as well, considering it's slap bang in the middle.
Absolutely, because we have clubs coming from all over the country. So it's smack bang in the middle, and it works for everybody.
Okay, so as you say, you've got clubs coming from all over the country. Like literally hundreds of young people are descending on Athlone this weekend, Saturday, on the Tús Athlone grounds. Tell us what's happening at the youth conference.
Well, we're really excited. We have the Ombudsman for Children who is coming to address our young people. No Name Clubs are run by our young people. They're supported and aided in that by our adult volunteers. But if you said to me, what's a club look like? I'd say to you, every club is different. Every club is unique because every club reflects the different interests of the teenagers who are in the club and who are running the club. And then as a national organisation, we bring them together for things like the youth conference. So they're all coming in under the No Name Club banner. So what's very important in No Name Club is youth voice. And our young people lead us. We have a youth council, and they feed directly into the board of No Name Club. And we also have a member who's the secretary to the board, Fionn Gallagher. He came up right through. He started as a member at 15. He became actually our host of the year at one point. He went on to the youth council, and now he actually sits as a board member. So the voice of young people and how they interact with the world is very important to us. So we have the Ombudsman coming in to talk to them about their rights, about their voice, and about how important it is. And then I think the person creating the most excitement out of the weekend is Garen Noon. We have Garen joining us. As you know, Garen, TikTok star, comedian, but he's actually coming to talk to our young people about anxiety. He has suffered from this himself in the past, and he's going to speak to them about, you can suffer from anxiety, you can have all these thoughts and feelings, but you can actually get better and go on and have 1.5 million people following you on TikTok. So I can promise you he is delicious, and it will be a wonderful, wonderful day. And then we have a representative talking to us about road safety and driving and alcohol and what happens through that. And peppered through the day then, we have the outdoor education students who have prepared a series of challenges, shall we say, for our young people, which they really enjoy all across the campus in Juice there.
Well, there's a fantastic array of things going on there, and a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, Edith, which I think sound particularly positive. They kind of mix together nicely there. The first is that No Name Club seems to be able to be defined by those who are part of the club specifically. Was that always the original intention when the No Name Club movement was set up so long ago?
Yes, it was, because it was set up. It was set up for young people. Actually, the reason we're called the No Name Club is our founders, Eddie Doyle, Eamon Doyle, Eddie Kerr, and Father Tom Murphy, sadly no longer with us. They set up the club and they wanted a cool name for the club. So it's actually recorded in the minutes of the first meeting. This is a meeting of the No Name Club, and it stuck. And it was a gift to us because what it represents to us is in No Name Club, there's no labels. We take every young person as they come through the door. Each one of them is a unique, special individual, and that's whom we celebrate, and that's whom we support. And we give them a safe space where they can explore a social life and have a peer group without any pressure to enjoy alcohol or other drugs. Now, we're not an anti-alcohol organisation. We're not the pioneers. We respect the right of people to drink over the age of 18. But what we're involved in is harm reduction. All of the research shows that the longer that you can delay a young person drinking, the less hold it will have on them in life. And it's very hard as a young person if you're on your own out there deciding that you won't drink. So what No Name Club also provides you with is a peer group to socialize with you who are all doing the same thing. So therefore, a teenager always wants to be part of a group. It's just part of the growing cycle of teenage life.
What if a teenager's parent or indeed an adolescent is listening to Health and Fitness this evening and thinks they like the sound of No Name Club and the spirit in which it's obviously been created and executed across Ireland? How would they check to see if there's a club near them that they could get involved in?
Go to our website, www.nonameclub.ie. And if you're listening to us, the main thing about No Name Club is come and have fun with us. We call ourselves a family, and we are. And, our tagline, if you go to YouTube, if you watch our videos, there's plenty up there. Our tagline is come join our family. If you're sitting there thinking, I'd love my son or daughter to be able to participate in this, look us up, www.nonameclub.ie. Talk to us. We have development officers who will come out and meet you and help you start a club. If you're a young person, go to your parents, go to adults, and say, listen, I'd love to start a No Name Club. Will you help me? Because truly, it's a fun environment. It's a safe environment for our young people. And, we're all doing good. We're a voluntary organization. So all of these young people are supported by an amazing group of volunteers, who will be traveling with them tomorrow, who mind them in clubs every week as they come in for their club night. If you're sitting there and you're thinking, I'd like to get involved in that as well, do come join our family. We will train you. We will guide and vet you. We will look after you, and we support you because every club has a dedicated support officer. So you won't be alone in establishing a club, and you will have plenty of support from us. So, it's one of the best things you could ever do with your life is to volunteer and be that meaningful person in a young person's life. And if you're a teenager listening to this, come along, join us, have fun.
No Name Club is hosting their National Youth Conference at Tusathlone Lone tomorrow. There will be hundreds of young people and their youth club leaders descending on the Midlands, along with the likes of Garen Noon, who will obviously be an A-lister piece of entertainment. We've been listening to Edith Geraghty, the Vice President of No Name Club, whom I am thanking for joining us. Thanks again, Edith.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Next, we're talking about World COPD Day.
health and fitness.
With DS Sports. Is your sports club ready for a Christmas kit upgrade? Contact DS Sports at 085 871 5311 or info@dsports.ie. DS Sports, the teamwear specialists. Your success, our priority. Let's grow together.
Midlands 103.
World COPD Day is taking place next week. That is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's an issue that many people in the country are affected by, and suitably there's a couple of events taking place in the Midlands to mark the fact that it's World COPD Day. The COPD and Me Roadshow is visiting the Harbour Place Shopping Centre in Mullingar on Monday. That's November the 18th. That'll be there from 8:30 in the morning until 11 in the morning, and you'll get a free spirometry breathing test there and plenty of advice as well. Also, there's a COPD and Me pop-up information stand at the Kyle Shopping Centre in Portlaoise, and that's taking place on the Tuesday from 11 in the morning until 2 o'clock. I'm very glad to say we are joined on Health and Fitness this evening by Denise Croke, who's living in Portlaoise. Denise was diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease in 2014 after a prolonged period of illness. She's also a HSE Health Promotion and Improvement Officer, and she joins us on the programme, as I said. Denise, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David.
Tell us about your COPD story. How is it that you found out that you had it, and what were you going through before you found out?
In January of 2024, and probably the preceding Christmas, I had a persistent cough that wouldn't go away, no matter how many times I took antibiotics or steroids and repeat visits to the GP, and it would go away for a little while and then it would come back, and every time it came back it seemed to be a bit more aggressive and a bit harder to function around it. At that time then I started to experience breathlessness walking up the stairs, which was a completely new thing for me. I had only just turned 40, had a very active lifestyle, fit, healthy, did all the things you think you're supposed to do and avoided the things you think you're supposed to avoid, and began to lose weight. And this breathlessness and this cough just got worse and worse and worse until eventually my GP said, look, I'm not happy with this. We need to investigate this. So I had a series of tests, one of which was a spirometry test, beginning with an X-ray and then going for a CT and a bronchoscopy. And eventually, between all of those things and the spirometry test, was diagnosed with COPD round about March or April of 2024.
Okay. Can I take you back to when you're first experiencing these symptoms? That must have been really frightening, because obviously COPD is a serious condition. It's really important that you do diagnose it and find out how to live with it, as it were. But by the same token, these symptoms can probably be misplaced when people are experiencing them. And I imagine for your own mental well-being, it was so important to find out what they were.
Yeah, it can, as people age, it can be very easy to dismiss those symptoms as, I'm getting a bit older now. Obviously, I'm not going to have the stamina I used to have. I am going to struggle maybe with physical activity more so than I used to. But for anyone who's experienced that particular breathlessness that comes with a respiratory condition, it isn't like anything else, and the level of fatigue isn't like anything else, and it's so difficult to explain to people, and because I was so long waiting for a diagnosis that made sense of all of those things, my mental health really began to suffer. And I think I actually thought in some part of myself that either I was making this up and there was actually nothing wrong with me, or there was something really, really badly wrong with me and nobody had just found it yet. So initially when I got the diagnosis, I thought, oh, this is brilliant. I have a name for this now. This is great. I can manage it. I'm not going mad. I can access a treatment. And, and I got through I suppose a couple of days processing that with relief, and then it struck me that that it was an illness that was incurable. So while it could be managed, while it could be treated, it was never going to go away. And I fell into a period of particularly bad mental health, with depression and anxiety at the thought that these life-limiting symptoms, as I was experiencing them, were always going to be with me. And I suppose I made my life very small, in the sense that it began to feel very selfish to make plans on a day when I felt reasonably good, that on the day that they happened, I may not have the energy to follow through on. So, for example, the level of fatigue could be to the point where if I needed to be somewhere in the afternoon, I would begin by having my shower at 8 o'clock in the morning. I would have to rest. Then I could get dressed and I would have to rest again. And really the most simple daily tasks were almost overwhelming with the energy expenditure that they took from me. So I had a very bad period for a couple of years, but I was very fortunate in the sense that one of the respiratory nurses in Naas Hospital recommended a program to me called Living Well, which is a 6-week program for people with chronic illnesses, not necessarily all COPD. And over those 6 weeks, it was the opportunity to share with people who understood what it's like to live with a chronic illness, to suddenly have your life reframed in a way, and to have to learn how to manage medication, to know which medications interacted with which other ones, to schedule your life around hospital appointments, a whole new landscape really, but also how to manage the fatigue and to live around, like living with COPD is very much a life lived around exacerbations and flare-ups. You kind of really make the most of the good days in between the days that aren't so good. That being said, it is a very manageable illness for a very good number of people. And I can say now that I have a very good quality of life, that I've learned how to manage the illness through organisations like COPD Support Ireland and the COPD support groups, through self-management support, through the chronic disease hubs, and the respiratory teams, and the new initiatives in the community like pulmonary rehab that allow you to experience breathlessness through exercise in a safe way. Because we would say that, the first best thing to do for yourself if you have a diagnosis of COPD is to give up smoking if smoking is a factor. And then the next best thing is to develop habits of physical activity at whatever level, at whatever ability. I would say find something that you enjoy doing and do it often. And pulmonary rehab, if you have the opportunity to avail of it, is an exercise program that's combined with education, information and support, and has trained healthcare professionals, so that if you do lose your breath, it's not as frightening, because you have somebody there who helps you get control of it again and shows you that there is a certain level of breathlessness that isn't dangerous, that's okay, that's manageable. And you get your confidence back, and you can start to, I suppose, you learn a new way of being in your body, and with that then you develop strategies, and it just becomes, I would say COPD is part of me, but it isn't all of me, and like any other part of me, it gets integrated into the rest, and you just get on with your day.
It sounds like with the help that you've had along the way in developing techniques to live with COPD, that the journey's actually made you far more aware of how your body works, what it needs, and ultimately how you can, with your mind, control elements that sometimes felt like they weren't in control initially.
Yeah, I think for me, it was very much around developing what I've called the next best thing mindset. So I, for example, could, on a good day, I could walk 10 kilometers. Now, I couldn't run the length of myself ever, even when I was young and fit. But I could walk 10 kilometers. Now, on a day where my lungs aren't great, I know I'm not going to be able to walk 10 kilometers, but I also know my mental health needs me to be moving and needs me to be doing something. So the next best thing might be I can do 5 kilometres, I can do 3 kilometres, I can do 2 kilometres, whatever it might be. But it's allowing for a next best thing, so that not every day is going to be your best day, but every day you can do your best to do something. And learning that in myself was a huge gain for me in all aspects of my life, I have to say, but particularly in terms of managing the COPD, because I am a very active person, and my mental health has always been the reason I've been an active person. I'm not someone who can be mindful in a still way. I'm mindful through movement at whatever level I'm able to on a given day. So it was very important to me to develop that awareness of that there is always something I can do. And also I'm very aware that on the spectrum of people who are living with COPD, there are potentially people who would give anything in the world to be able to do what I might resent only being able to do on a given day. So that, that awareness is very prominent in me as well. I appreciate that I'm at a stage of the illness still where I have a very good quality of life now. I'm able to work full time. I'm able to exercise as long as I don't go too crazy. I think it's important that we talk about the number of people who potentially have COPD who are not diagnosed, and I wonder how much of that is we don't want to know because there's a fear. But I would say that, for people who have a persistent cough or people who are maybe experiencing new onset breathlessness, if you're around in Mullingar or in Portlaoise, to avail of the opportunity of the spirometry test, because having the diagnosis, it won't change what's actually happening in your body. But what it will do is it will give you information, it will give you access to treatment that could improve your quality of life and potentially stop any future damage to your lungs. And it will also give you access and information about COPD support groups, about pulmonary rehab, and about ways that you can live very well with COPD, but it really is about gathering the information and the supports around yourself to make that happen.
Yeah, and just to put some hard numbers on what you've said there, Denise, it's estimated that there could be up to 380,000 people in Ireland with COPD, but with 2/3 undiagnosed. So over 200,000 estimated could be going around without knowing that this is the specific issue that they're dealing with, that there are specific ways in treating it. And as you say, people could get to Mullingar next week for a free spirometry test. And that could be the first step in unlocking access to perspective and life quality that you've done so well in expressing on Health and Fitness this evening. Thanks so much for joining us on the programme, and the very best of luck going forward with everything. And just to outline the details once again for anyone listening who may be interested or who have experienced any of the symptoms that they've heard on the programme this evening, the COPD Support Ireland Roadshow is heading to the Harbour Place Shopping Centre in Mullingar on Monday. That's this coming Monday, November 18th, and it'll be there from 8:30 to 11 in the morning. And then there's a pop-up information stand in the Kyle Shopping Centre in Portlaoise on Tuesday from 11 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Denise, once again, thanks very much.
Thanks a million, David.
That's another week of Health and Fitness done and dusted. Thank you so much for joining me. Joe Cooney with Country Roads is coming up next after the news at 8, and as ever, I will talk to you soon.